Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Joanna, Ponicka, and Erlend, Rongen, who both work for Equivest Metals, a company that uses AI-driven mineral systems models to pinpoint critical processes needed to form large mineral deposits, aiming to significantly increase exploration success. In this episode, we're going to be talking more about obviously the company, the exploration space in general, and the company being part of BHP's Xplor program and how this has helped the company develop as a business. Joanna and Erlend, both welcome to the podcast, and how are you doing?
It's a pleasure to be here.
That is great to be here.
Yeah, great. Thank you for both joining the podcast. So I just wondered if you can tell us a little bit about yourselves, your career, your background, how you got into the mining industry, and then we'll go into the questions talking about Equivest Metals. So, Joanna, we can start with yourself.
By background, 12 years of experience in exploration, both across mining industry and oil and gas. So, two different sectors. A lot of really good learnings. Career took a turn into the oil and gas, but it turned really useful for what we're doing right now. Been in all kinds of roles: geologist, exploration manager, portfolio manager, investor as well in the sector. So quite a broad bird eye view. And we're really trying to see how we can move that needle of improving success rates in exploration with Equivest.
Yeah. I suppose I just want to ask one question. How comes you moved from oil and gas into mining? Was there a particular reason?
I think it was more of a cyclicity of the industry that we work in, and I really wanted to do exploration when the cycle ended in 2012, 2013. Oil and gas was still doing really well, so I went to oil and gas industry. I was, in retrospect, a really good decision because it gave me the tools that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like, we'll probably touch upon some of them in this episode as well.
Yeah. And Erlend, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Erlend Rongen. I'm an economist by education. I used to work in a bank for 7 years, where I worked as a data scientist. So I made a little bit of a pivot in my career. In the bank, I worked as predicting what are the products that the customer is going to buy. And we were using transaction data as the data source in order to predict that. So it is both prediction, both what Joanna is doing, both where I'm coming from, is trying to predict a positive outcome. And this is where sort of Joanna and we were thinking that she saw the tools that I were using and the results that we were producing in the bank. And then she was thinking like, wow, I think I want some of these tools for geology. And this was kind of like how we started the Equivest.
Okay, great. So either one of you, if you can just tell us a little bit about the company, how obviously it was formed, and what you've been doing to date.
Do you want to start, Erlend, on some of the journey?
I can start like a few years ago. Joanna and we started thinking that Joanna had a really good track record of predicting what was the outcome of wells, oil exploration wells that was drilled in the North Sea. And we were starting to think, what if we were using geology and bridge the gap between geology and investments?
So we started initially as investors in the sector and focusing on both early stage exploration and the discoveries. And we looked at probably 500 exploration companies in the sector and something over 1,000 exploration prospects. And we just realized that it will be very difficult to build a robust portfolio of exploration projects. It just wasn't enough of these companies to invest in, especially when you start applying some of the systems and the criteria that I was using in oil and gas industry and modify them for the petroleum such as mineral systems. We realized that we can continue investing as we still do in the discoveries that happen more or less 1 time per year. But we really need to do something about filling up this early stage exploration gap. I think if we think in parallel, probably BHP also arrived at similar result that we really need more early stage exploration focus from the companies as the pipeline is pretty slim in the industry for a variety of reasons.
Okay. And obviously, Joanna, you're a geologist by background, and exploration success rates are low in the industry, as you've just mentioned. What are we doing wrong in the exploration space, or is it an industry problem, or is it a company problem? I just wonder if you can elaborate on that.
I think there's several different reasons, and one of them is exploration is actually really difficult. Erlend, maybe you want to give the example you gave to us explorers one day, and it was quite eye-opening, actually, that example. I can add some more reasons.
Exploration is a really difficult problem to try and solve, and it is not like many other problems that we face in life, such as sports. Because if you are into sports, and if you're whatever sport you're doing, if you want to practice your golf swing, you can go to the driving range and you can practice 10,000 times, and you can make small little increments, and you can hone your swing so that you get really good at it. But the problem in mineral exploration is that we don't get 10,000 tries, and this is what makes mineral exploration such a difficult learning environment, and it requires a little bit of a different approach than what we are used to in order to solve such complex problems.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the reasons, and I think it's a reason that a lot of geologists can relate to. And we also, what we see is actually early stage exploration is very much underfunded. And we do have enough capital in the sector, but somehow less and less of it is going towards early stage exploration. I think more or less it halved over the last 20 years. And we, as participants in the sector, as well as investors, we track the discoveries of the last 5 years across all commodities. And talking about major discoveries, so the Tier 1, Tier 2 project, and 80% of them comes from early stage exploration. So I think that also probably explains why we're not doing so well, because the place that produces the most discoveries for us is the one that we spend the least capital. From the $6 billion that junior sector spends and $7 billion that majors are spending. So it's definitely, we need to shift somehow this capital into what is perceived as more risky side of exploration, but it shouldn't be, as this is the one that is actually producing those big discoveries. And I think another aspect is also quality of exploration targets that we are producing as a sector. We did study in 2022, actually, of nickel exploration targets drilled in Australia. This was the hot nickel price here, so it was actually a lot of exciting targets being drilled. But when we started looking at the characteristics of those targets and just really applying some pretty simple screening criteria for what good prospect looks like, we narrowed down from around 60 to 5 projects that were interesting. And in those 5 projects, there was actually a Tier 2 discovery. So this is where we started asking ourselves questions like, what would the rates look like in this industry when it comes to success if we started only drilling those 5 instead of spending capital on the other 55? So I think there are some improvements that we have to do as both investors and as geologists and explorers.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, you just tell us a little bit about your particular AI software and what it I suppose will it actually do for the exploration space, and what do companies that work with you, what do they expect to receive?
Erlend, do you want to explain a little bit the AI as a CTO? I think it's a hot topic in this industry, and I think you have interesting reflections.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to do in Equivest is that we're trying to use mineral systems to ask the right questions. And we're trying to answer those questions using AI and data because it's much quicker, it's much more accurate, and we're using data and not gut feeling. But I think the problem is that most of the tools that geologists use today, they were never designed for mineral exploration, and they were never designed to run machine learning and advanced analytics on large geospatial datasets. So this is when we started at Equivest. We started by building our own exploration data platform so that we can bring the tools of AI and machine learning into the hands of geologists. It really helps on the speed and the quality at which we answer questions. For instance, when we were working together with BHP, we came across a paper that was mapping rock formation that turned out to be really critical to our mineral systems models. But the problem is that it was only mapped in a very small area. And what we can do then is that we can use machine learning together with hyperspectral satellite data. We can extract the particular spectral signature of that formation, and we can map it across 2 million square kilometers. And that's just an example of how powerful such tools can be. And I guess we all heard saying that the one who turns over the most rocks wins the game. And this is one of the tools that we employ to improve the speed of mineral exploration. But I think in terms of using machine learning, I think it's really important that exploration companies and the exploration industry, that we have a realistic expectation to what is it that machine learning can do and what is it that machine learning can't do. And in the bank, I worked predicting what products is it that the customer is going to buy next. And a friend of mine, he runs a clothing store, online clothing store. And I know how important it is to understand the exact reasons, the critical processes that leads people to buy something. So I asked him, what is it that makes your customers buy your product? And then he told me something interesting. He said that, I don't know really. And the reason why he says that is that when he uses Facebook ads, he basically sets a quite big target of the customers that he's going to target. And then he runs a lot of ads. And the more money that he spends, the better the algorithm is at predicting what customers will buy his product. So actually the entire sort of behavioral psychology of advertising is now fully automated by Facebook. So you actually don't need to know anything about the reasons why customers buy products. And wouldn't that be a beautiful thing to do in mineral exploration? What if we could just train a model that would take all the geological data, compile it, and figure out where the next tier 1 deposit is going to be? I think it would be easy to fund. I think it would be easy to get funding for that startup. But I think that what is really important when talking about AI and machine learning and exploration is to understand that nature only gave us so many mineral deposits that we can train on. So the big difference is that when Facebook has billions of data points that they can train their model and billions of purchases, the outcome that they can train it on, in mineral exploration, we don't have that many outcomes to train our models on. And then we are hitting the wall on, is the model really going to be able to understand what subtle nuances in the data is one of the critical processes that geological processes that needs to have happened? I think that this is the problem, but also the opportunity that we in Equivest are trying to pursue. And that is to let geologists map out the critical processes, to make that a human job, or we can also get support for machine learning to do that. But first map out, understand what are the critical processes that needs to have happened in order for a large deposit to form. And then we can score them all together, and then we can let machine learning try and improve that, to try and figure out in what combinations are these processes most favorable, and are there any circumstances that they are less favorable.
Okay. Probably this question for Joanna. Obviously, and as you've alluded to, obviously lack of funding in the exploration space to execute on projects. Now, would you say the industry is underfunded within the junior space, or is it good projects are getting funded and the rest are not?
It's a really good question. we commonly hear that we are underfunded, and like most of the CEOs you talk to, they so like we need more capital, like getting enough capital. But I think when you look at the industry as a whole, we have 2,500 explorers out there, and the junior explorers, and we have 6 billion in the junior exploration, and then 7 billion last year in the majors in terms of exploration spend. That's a lot of money. If you ask me, 6 billion on exploration in the junior sector, like we could do a lot of good stuff with that money. But I think it's key problem we have is like a lot of that money, as we know, goes maybe to lifestyle companies as well. And also we think in terms of all the G&A that happens, or for 2,500 companies, that's quite a lot of cost as well. So it's I think we're a bit too spread out, and we're all trying to do the same thing. And I think another aspect is like there's more capital going towards brownfield exploration, which is considered safer. But as we see at results of exploration, this is what causing quite low success rates. So I think we need to have some sort of shift in how we communicate with investors, how we explain to them different opportunities in the sector. And I hear time and time again, like early stage exploration, very difficult to raise capital for. And I guess that's why we saw BHP Xplor as well appearing in the sector.
Yeah. Before I speak about the BHP Xplor program, I've got a couple more questions, and probably to yourself next, Erlend. What other advances are there in AI that will help the industry from your point of view? And obviously, you've been doing a lot of research into obviously AI and understanding our industry. What other things do you think AI could help the exploration space?
I think the most important thing that has come just the recent years, that is the language models. Because a lot of geological information is locked inside the PDF format of geological reports and geological papers. And the ability of large language models to not just to ask a question to one document, but the ability to actually search for the right type of meaning within a large body of documents, that is something that is incredibly powerful with the large language models. When we did our work in the BHP work that Joanna is going to get back to, we downloaded, I think it was around 400 PDF documents from the internet. And what we needed to do was to figure out which one of these documents contains any information about salts. And where do you start from that when you have like this large body of documents? So what we did was that we basically downloaded all the text from these documents, put it into a database, and then we were able to much more efficiently search those documents. And this is where large language models and vector search, is a little bit of a technical term, can actually let you ask a question and you will get back the results that are the most relevant. Really shortens down the time it takes for geologists to find those geological papers that are saying something about the presence of salts in the area. So I think that unlocking what is also fascinating is that this technology is multilingual. So even if if the papers are in English or if they are in Portuguese for that matter, you can still write the question in English and you will get back the relevant search result. So it kind of like it makes it much more easy to get access to the data that can answer your question, and it's multilingual, which is pretty good.
Yeah. And I suppose, Joanna, from a geology perspective, what would you like, and whether it's out there or not, what would you like AI to also do within the geology and exploration space?
I think it's one of the aspects which is a boring aspect in a way, is the data cleaning. Like if we still think about a lot of, some jurisdictions have really good data, but there's a lot of legacy data, there's a lot of poor formats, all kinds of formats. Data needs to be brought on the same standards before you can start doing the analysis. I think automating some of those processes, are time consuming, is going to be something quite significant. It's actually something we are looking at tomorrow in a workshop, with the team as well, like what are the most important parts that we could try to automate with even existing tools that we have already from large language models. So it's I think it's freeing up geologists to do more brain work. Actually, is a key aspect as well.
Yeah.
I think I also want to add to that geologists work with a lot of really difficult data. This comes from someone who works with data, made it their line of work. Really works with a lot of very difficult data. And I think geologists spend a lot of time on just trying to get data into a format where you can actually make sense of it. And I think that what we have seen in the work that we have done so far is that simply just having a data scientist on the team, actually that is expert on data cleaning and getting the data into the right formats, just that increases the window of opportunity in the data that we can process and the data that we can make useful within the budget of the project that we're working in.
Going back to Joanna, obviously based on your background, you've been in the oil and gas and mineral exploration. What can you learn from your activities and work in the oil and gas industry? What can the mining explorers learn from the oil explorers and from your, obviously?
I think going from mining to oil industry was an eye opener to me. I think the first years in mining industry, I felt like walking in the dark. I was very focused from the start to understand what is the recipe, what is the process that we should follow to make discoveries, like what are the tangible elements of that we can quantify as geologists, or at least qualify in some way. But that's the answer I was not able to get within the industry, even working for a major. I think that was a little bit scary. We seem to do field work, the soil sampling, geophysics, but it was not the real process of understanding why these deposits are where they are and what are the controls on them. It was very much focused on looking for pathfinders, basically. And when I moved to oil and gas industry, there was set process for figuring out what processes were important and how you quantify them and how do you score them to have a large oil field or large mineral deposits to form. That process, it had to form in the oil and gas industry because you're dealing with cover of sediment or you're dealing with seawater, like you don't see your rocks outcropping. So you start to get a bit more creative how you're going to quantify geology under the ground. You, of course, have seismic, which is an incredible tool, but a lot of times you have no controls. You just have a seismic image and you don't even know what these lines are, what age they are, and you need to deal with those uncertainties in your models. I think just being introduced to that petroleum system, that was a game changer. And success rate in oil and gas industry is 1 out of 3. We are exploring for much more difficult targets that previous generations were exploring at. Like a lot of businesses matured, a lot of easy stuff is gone. And the success rates have been on the rise actually over the last decade as the industry gets more and more accustomed to the petroleum system framework and its application. I think in mineral industry, the mineral system has been around for a decade, more or less, right now. And a lot of people, when you talk to them, they're like, oh, we already been using them for a long time. But when you come from petroleum industry, you're like, no, you have not been using them. This is not what they look like. They need a lot more refinement to look, let's say, similar and be applicable in the same way. So that's something we spend a lot of time in Equivest to build up across different commodities, especially initially as investors, but also now helping other companies to deploy them on their projects and better understand the geology they're working in. And it's just invaluable tool, like amount of projects that we screen and look at, and how even within a day or two you can put a score on something that, okay, this is Spark, because it doesn't have characteristics of the right system. It's just a lot of smoke but no fire, basically. And it is scary how many places we explore where the elements are just not there and they didn't happen in the right time in order to produce anything of size.
Yeah. I want to move on to obviously the Xplor program that the company participated in, and I wanted to get both of your points of view on how the actual program went for yourselves and for the company, what you learned from the program, and I suppose moving on, how the program is now going to help the company move forward. So, Erlend, I wonder if you can give us your opinion first of all.
I'm going to start with one of the latest part of your question. When we started in the BHP Xplor program, we had a much wider winning aspiration than what we have now. And the coaching and the guiding from BHP and their best experts was really helping us to narrow down the winning aspiration so that we now focus on only one thing, and that is to improve success rates of mineral exploration. And we build all our capabilities and our whole strategy around supporting that only one winning aspiration. I think that is, like, at least seen from my perspective, the most important thing that it did for our company.
I think it also allowed us to scale and confirmed some of the ideas. Sometimes when you're trying to innovate, especially in difficult sector like exploration, and as Erlend mentioned, we cannot go to the golf range and hit the ball 10,000 times. It's we have to sort of even bounce ideas from each other, discuss and reflect. And I think BHP Xplor created that community of really good discussions and brought a lot of external and internal experts as well that shared their experiences, shared the different projects that they're working on, and it allowed us to triangulate more what is the best approach to move that needle on improving success rate, and what are the key areas to focus on, really.
Yeah, and obviously being part of the program, you mentioned, I suppose your strategy was pretty wide before you joined, and now it's narrowed it down. So I went to the BHP Xplor breakfast a few weeks ago, and they were obviously discussing about the program. What benefits did you, as a company, apart from your strategy and apart from the cash that the program gives a company that goes through the 6-month program, what else did you get from being part of the 6-month program? What else did you get apart from obviously your strategy and focusing more on one specific thing rather than many? Again, just wondering from both of yourselves, what did you get individually from being part of the Xplor 6-month Xplor program?
Yeah, I think that the BHP Xplor program, we did a large project as part of our BHP Xplor program. And Equivest is different from most of the cohort companies in the way that BHP didn't invest in our assets on the ground. They invested in our team and in our strategy. So what we did was that we did a prospectivity study for about a quarter of Africa, in the Southern Africa region, where we made a prospectivity study for sedimentary copper. And it was really interesting to work closely with BHP on such a large exploration program. It allowed us to build a team. It allowed us to build new capabilities in our company, and it allowed us to test drive big scale our exploration methodology. And this was really, especially for me, I don't come from a geology background. But when we were mapping out the critical processes into more than 50 layers of data, and when you stack all those layers on top of each other, it becomes really easy to see those areas where all the critical processes lined up for the formation of large deposits. And the interesting thing is that there is both untested targets, but that was also before we run machine learning on top of the data. So to actually get to test drive it and get feedback from a major such as BHP, who is very advanced in mineral system and takes it very seriously to change the course of mineral exploration to improve success rates. So that was a big thing for us to be part of that project.
I think also as individual, you get a lot, that's what everybody says on the program, that they gain a lot as companies, but also as individuals, there's a lot of one-on-one training in leadership, communications, business development, exploration, operations, all these aspects are covered. I don't think you can take a training like that anywhere. It doesn't exist. The courses are not offered on that level. So it is quite an incredible opportunity for anybody working in exploration to immerse themselves in.
Yeah. And I suppose lastly on the Xplor program, what would you say to anyone that potentially is thinking about applying to the program and why they should actually apply and hopefully be successful to be awarded the contract to go onto the program? Why?
I think it's, especially the companies or the individuals that say, we don't have funding for early stage exploration. Like now there is a funding program for great projects. And I know that there are really good people screening for those projects as well. And they will be able to tell apart good projects from bad projects. So really, if you have an idea, even as an individual, not necessarily a company, like that's an incredible opportunity to bring that idea and make it come to life with actually backing and support from a major company. We have not had anything like that in the industry before. I think personally, the program is very generous, both financially and both in terms of all the support that you get from top BHP people.
And Erlend, any reason why you think people should apply to the program?
I think if you have the ability to think outside of the box and build a model around why we are exploring in this area, I think that this is if you have build a good model around your prospect, and I think that is something that they will notice.
And the application is very short, actually. They made it very easy for themselves and for everybody. So I think it's I think the deadline is approaching. So it takes a day maximum to write that application. So take opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And Joanna, I think this is obviously more of a geology question. What would you say the biggest change, what we're actually going to see and experience from mineral exploration over the next decade? And obviously, you guys are involved in AI. Is that going to be the biggest change to the exploration space? And what else can we expect?
I like to think about exploration as a toolkit. Like you need a whole range of things to make it work. And I think AI is part of them. And I think my hope, at least, is the next decade is when a lot of that toolkit starts to come together. I think it's the first time in a very long time we're starting to see new exploration companies emerging, some of them backed by venture capital. And I hope that this continues, or we actually get new prospect generators out there with capability to produce better prospects. That's where we also hoping to be ourselves, be one of the companies that brings better prospects to the market and turns them into discovery, not once, but multiple times. And I think I really hope that we see that shift over the next decade. We also not really well organized in this sector. I think at the moment, Junior Explorer tries to do absolutely everything. I think in terms of skill sets, tools, expertise, you need people and even people personalities. It makes more sense to sort of separate into prospect generators and then those companies that really go about executing the operations on the ground, deal with the local stakeholders, which is becoming increasingly more challenging and important. So I think it's when we look at the toolkits, I think we need to start segregating a little bit more in this industry and seeing how we make that work for everybody in terms of success, basically.
And lastly, what's the outlook for the next 6 to 12 months for Equivest as a business and as a company?
We're just ramping on for another big project, actually, to look at a large exploration region. We are also open for another opportunities if there are companies that would like to look at their projects or do large regional studies, both mid-size, majors or juniors. We work with all of them. And we also recently applied actually for the EU funding. We don't know if we receive it, but there is more and more openness to mineral exploration. So we also want to take advantage of seeing what we can do in Europe as Europe-based startup.
Great. Thank you, Joanna and Erlend, for coming on the podcast, telling us about Equivest, obviously, and your AI technology, and also your experiences on the BHP Xplor program. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to obviously follow the company and your story and obviously advancements in AI, how can they go about doing that? What social media platform channels are you on?
Our website is equivestmetals.com, and we are active both on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can follow me and Erlend on LinkedIn, or Twitter is Equivest Xplor. I think we have over 8,000 followers on Twitter, a lot of investors actually following us. So we're trying to bridge two platforms, more geologists on LinkedIn and more investors on Twitter, actually, X this day.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. Thank you both for coming on the podcast, and wish you well for the remainder of the year going into next year. And obviously, it's an important subject. AI is ever increasingly coming into our industry and other industries. And hopefully, you're going to make a few big discoveries with working with companies and joint venturing with companies to discover those tier one assets. Obviously, wish you well for the remainder of the year and going into 2025.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Again, this episode is talking about AI. So please share this episode, not with people just in our mining industry, but people outside of the mining industry, because AI is not just obviously mining, it is across many industries. And some of the techniques and I suppose AI technologies that both Joanna and Erlend have developed have come from other industries and now coming into our mining industry. So anyone from other industries can potentially learn something that Equivest are implementing into the mining industry. So thank you for your continued support. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.